Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our first session of the day, but our sixth session of the 2024 Government and Public Sector Virtual Conference. My name is Christian Fieldgraf, and I'm a partner here at Bekaert. I lead our government and public sector industry. The conference content is designed for anybody responsible for financial accounting and reporting for government organizations, but it's also really for anybody interested in protecting and improving the efficiency of the business of government and your organization. This year, we're offering this over 2 days, 10 sessions and 10 CPEs all together. Same as we did last year, hope you find it very useful and helpful. Look forward to all the feedback. We got a lot of great feedback last night from attendees and had super participation yesterday, and do like that feedback. Always ask you to do the polls at the end. It helps us make it better for next year and for our webinars that we have throughout the year. We hope you're planning on joining the next sessions throughout the rest of the morning and the afternoon for our virtual conference. To start out today, this is a important topic to a lot of us, and it's really about understanding the state of trust in the government, to learn some of the root cause and discuss some of the root causes of the declining trust and find ways to help restore trust in government. And for this morning's session, I am very, very pleased to welcome the CEO of Gov Navigators and longtime friend of mine and a lot of us here at the firm, Robert Shea. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, my friend. I'm delighted to be with you.
Thank you. So let's just jump right into it. I was looking at. Are we ready to have that polling question up yet?
I don't know, but why don't we dive in? Just do it.
So
go with the flow.
You're right. So a lot of us have worked together over the last 20 or 25 years that are at Cherry Bekaert in our advisory practice, and most of us have come out of public sector, and we really have a passion for the business of government. And it's something we believe in. We believe in the mission of our clients, and that's how we view things. So, as we've seen over time, and particularly the last handful of years, there's been a decline in trust in government. Sorry, I'm trying to get this back. What we've done is we've partnered with NAPA, the National Academy of Public Administration, where Robert's a fellow, and we're doing work around trust in government. We do a podcast series for mostly around federal government, which we're going to really expand into state and local government, which we'll talk about later on. But really what we're here to talk about today is looking at how trust is adjusted, really, and how people feel about government overall, federal, state, and local government. There's some good stories to tell, and there's some challenging stories that we'll talk about. Some trends that I don't think will surprise people as they go on, and some really interesting things that come up. One thing that I would like to as mentioned a couple weeks ago, I participated in a federal CFO study, or a panel discussion rather, that Robert hosted, and it was at the AGA, the Association of Government Accountants, at their annual professional development training conference in Denver, and there was about 12 CFOs, federal CFOs, and I was I think the state and local representative. That's where my background is, and I made the comment when we finished up that I really wish that more people could see the dedication in the room, because this was the topic, was around trust in government. People could have seen the dedication, the focus that these people had to really doing the right thing, to deliver better service, not only to their state and local partners, but also to the citizens in general. So there's a focus in the federal government, as well as what we're going to talk about today, to really help things get better. They recognize that there are some issues. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're just misperceptions. But what the state of trust is related to how people feel about government. Robert?
So just a little bit more background about me. Christian mentioned I'm a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. I was also Associate Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget. Christian was talking about an event we put together at the recent professional development training that the Association for Government Accountants hosts annually. This year it was in Denver, and it was a great opportunity to bring together officials across a broad spectrum of government operations. Christian, I was so grateful you could attend because you were an important voice at that table. But we also had the Commissioner of Social Security. We had the Fiscal Assistant Secretary from the Department of Treasury, folks from IRS, the General Services Administration, the Office of Management and Budget, Department of Agriculture, the Government Accountability Office. It was a great collection of expertise, but also, as you mentioned, dedication to improving the business of government. Or do you want me to pick up and set this stage now, Christian? Or are you going to do that?
Nope. This is there we go.
No. Hold on. Let's tick through some of these points. So the foundation we're going to discuss today is trust in government. And one of the presenters at the meeting was National Academy of Public Administration President and CEO Terry Gerton. Cherry Bekaert has sponsored a body of work by the Academy to sort of take a look at the landscape of studies of trust in government, get a sense of where they all say we are, and then tease out what we need to do to reverse the trend in declining trust in government. And that's the fact. We're at the lowest ebb of trust in government since it's been measured. One of the organizations that's contributing to this research is the Partnership for Public Service, which finds that only 23% of Americans trust the federal government, down from 35%, already low in 2022. Comparatively speaking, state and local governments are higher. Gallup reports that 68% of Americans trust their local government, 58% their state government. Trust in certain federal agencies also remains higher than government generally. And we're going to talk a lot about, what is driving these factors. So for God's sakes, let's go to the poll question. It's finally here, folks. So we'd like you to answer this question. When you hear federal government, which of the following do you think about first? Is it the president and the White House? Is it the legislative branch, Congress, the House and Senate? Is it the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, or is it federal agencies? You'll see this theme. We're going to juxtapose your views with what we hear from the research that the Academy is conducting and some focus groups they've conducted. So hopefully we will get a good read and be able to compare what other research shows. Christian mentioned as we were prepping that we ought to have hold music, and I offered to sing, but he declined. So that's all to your benefit. So here we go. So interesting. Nobody really thought the judicial branch was in that really question. And it looks like the bulk of the folks think it's federal government agencies. A few say the president and a few the legislative branch. So let's dive in then. Public trust is in near record lows. This is research from the Pew Research Center. And it shows, a height during the Johnson administration, and you generally see spikes following certain tragedies. 9/11, also another one of those. But right now, we see trust. You can see the moving average here and the individual polls, a general decline in trust in government. So the questions are often asked, do you trust government to handle certain problems? Do you trust it to handle international problems versus domestic problems? And you see here that, generally speaking, folks trust government to handle international problems to a greater degree than domestic problems. And when you ask it which branch of the government is trusted the most, you'll see that the judicial branch wins. The executive branch is a little bit higher than the legislative branch. All of those, though, I think folks would agree, are not where we want them to be. Christian, do you have any reflection on these?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of the partisan politics that takes place in the country, and just the infighting back and forth. I was looking at something. I was trying to look up the dates. There's the expression "close enough for government work," which my recollection's correct. It started around in the early 1900s, but it was a compliment about the accuracy of government work. It was expected to be, it was close enough for government work. It was good enough for me, and it's turned into a punchline. And that's really a sad thing to see. We're not going to turn it around overnight, but you start seeing things and you start communicating more, and the way it's communicated out. I think you can see that. We'll talk about it more as we go through. While the trust is way down in the federal space, there's still some good news for state and local, right? I think it's a reflection back on all politics is local, which we'll talk about when we get there.
So trust is also impacted by whether or not your party controls government. So if you're a Democrat and there's a Democrat in the White House, you generally have higher trust in government than those whose president is not in the White House. And you can see that the partisanship impacts to a large degree trust in government. So the trends in trust in government broadly conforms with a declining trust in society among institutions generally. Mass media, politicians, democratic decision-making, and reduced favorable ratings for both major political parties. So you see this slide on the left shows a decline in trust in media, decline in men and women in political life, and in the American people's interest in or ability to participate in democratic decision-making. The chart on the right, of course, shows the same thing for political parties. And so that sort of threatens our two-party system. Any reflection there, Christian?
As you see some of these, I'd suggest, we have a large number of people here. Feel free to put some ideas in the chat. Why do you think some of this is being driven this way? It's happening over time. I think it's largely, a change in the culture. The chart, one of the earlier charts, surprised me, that showed me how the difference between trust in government and your party in or out of power has historically been pretty big. It's been separated. I think maybe it's people look back fondly upon times gone past, and don't realize that there was a lot of animus between the party in and out of power throughout time, but it's clearly the trend is going down overall, which is unfortunate. And I think putting some actually somebody just put a comment on too much extremes in the parties. I couldn't personally agree more with you than on that topic. So let's keep rolling through.
Great. So you mentioned this, Christian, reduced trust in the federal government contrast with steady trust in local government and continued high trust in state government. This is an area where government is closer to the people, and the services the government provided are more direct. They can see them more clearly. They can make the connection more clearly. And Christian, you were the voice of state and local government at our roundtable. Any reaction there?
Yeah, I think this is it's a reflection on the way people feel, even about Congress, right? I hate Congress, but I love my congressman. Mine's really good. But we're closer to state and local government. The governor I worked for, used to talk about Bubba. It was the person at 2 blocks outside of the Capitol who he said I could sit down beside him at dinner and he wouldn't know who I was. He said, but what he did care is about this, this, and this, and we have to make sure those things are being done. We know our local people, right? And the folks that are on this call are all the ones that are engaged in the wheels of government. We are the people that live it and breathe it and do it. Like I said, Robert did. Now I work with you in a little different way. So you see that there's good things happening. The expression, I read it in the paper, it must be true, is definitely plays a part in that. But when it gets to local government and state government, you can see it. You can see that your roads are paved. You can see that the lights are on the streets and things like that. So I think that does keep the faith up in local and state government versus the federal.
Yep. So here's another perspective on trust in local government. Interestingly, all but Democrats have a higher level of trust in local government, but big contrast in the party affiliation in how you trust in what level of government you trust. I don't want to dwell on the political, but it is an interesting lens. So we're going to talk in much more detail about how the language you use impacts your answer to the question, do you trust government? And if you ask people whether they trust government, civil service, or civil servants, if you ask them who you distrust the most, and you ask them that question about civil servants, that gets the lowest score. So people have the highest regard for civil servants. And you can see how the answers change depending on how you pose the question. Government managers, workers, regulators, authorities generally, government administrators, government agencies, government officials, government bureaucrats. So bureaucrats in particular is a dirty word. And I think you'll all agree that among a large swath of the population, that has negative connotations. So the words you use in asking these questions is really important, especially if you want to reverse the trend.
I think this is some of this really surprised me, how negative some terms are viewed. But I think this is important too, as you're communicating to the public. When you're writing pieces or communicating out, and whether it be press releases or whatever it may be, keep an eye on this. Remember some of these words and how the reaction's going to come back to you.
So when you contrast trust in government with trust in the business and industry sector, government trends well below average. People have a positive view of restaurants, farmers, technology, accounting So a shout out to the Cherry Beckerts of the world. Federal government, though, is almost at the bottom. And then when you look at the average of all industries compared with the federal government, it's a stark contrast. So the work that's been invested in improving the customer experience for citizens interacting with their government is really important. But so is the importance of communicating stories about how the government is trying to deliver for the American people is critical. You know, Christian mentioned the folks at the round table and wished people could observe. You had the guy trying to turn around the delivery of benefits from the Social Security Administration next to the guy who is administering the distribution of funds, all dollars, by the federal government at the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, next to the woman who is overseeing the financial operations, the Internal Revenue Service, as well as, again, the Office of Management and Budget, who's trying to drive management improvements across the government, administering benefits from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Interior. There's a lot of work being invested in turning this around. And so getting the message out, doing better. Number one, customer experience has to be a priority, but getting the message out also critical, and getting it out in the right way. Christian, a reaction?
You know, you mentioned Commissioner O'Malley and what he's done just since he's been there. You know, he's very focused on so this is Commissioner of Social Security, very focused on customer experience and customer satisfaction, and just the hold times. People, whenever they would call in with the problem, has been dropped, I think 75% just in the few short months he's been there, by really looking and finding out what it's all about. He was a former big city mayor and governor prior to this, so he came in with a different view on client service, and brought that, and it's really changed the attitude of people within Social Security Administration to one of client service, and helping their customers realize that they've been a big part, an important part in people's lives whenever they're working with them. And so I think that's one of those great stories to be able to tell.
You know, you and I had this conversation about celebrating a reduction in wait times of like 4 hours to 2 hours. So you're on when you're putting that on a graph, you're reducing wait times in half, which seems heroic. But if a citizen, if a customer of the Social Security Administration still has to wait 2 hours to talk to somebody, well, that's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
And remember, we had IRS and Social Security in the room, and the IRS is benefiting from a massive investment in transformation that citizens are already seeing and will continue to see. The Social Security Administration does not have the same benefit, so it's got to address increasing workloads with the same amount of money it's had for decades.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something I mentioned earlier. I wish more people had the opportunity to listen to that conversation, see that conversation, and some of the misperceptions that are out there. I've been reading these comments, and they're fantastic. And some of the misperceptions, you mentioned IRS, you know, what was said about the infusion of money they got and where it was going to, and how it's being used, and what's being done with it, and how it's being measured. Just fascinating feedback from the people that are doing it firsthand, and purely focused on the business of government. No other agenda.
So this is a mildly interesting slide. It shows spikes in trust after certain events. I mentioned 9/11. I was an official of the Bush administration after 9/11, where, you know, the patriotism and hope for the government was very high, and unfortunately that was squandered. events always conspire to put the presidency at a disadvantage, but we should figure out a way to capitalize on these various spikes when they occur. So we talked about federal agencies having better trust than the government generally, and they're better, but they could be a lot. They could be better, but they're a lot. They could be a lot worse. Postal Service, only 62% rate the Postal Service as excellent or good. And I don't know if you know the comedian Kathy Madigan, but she's got a great bit about, don't complain about the Postal Service. You're putting, a low dollar stamp on a document that somebody's going to deliver in the middle of the wilderness in a couple of days. Nonetheless, this shows the array of ratings by agency, and I'm sure these fluctuate. The Secret Service, I bet, wouldn't get the same rating today as it got when the survey was taken, and hopefully the IRS would improve. Any reaction, Christian?
Yeah, I think what you said is right on. And I think there's just so many jokes about the post office, for example, but you're right. You take a piece of paper with a stamp on it and it shows up someplace on the other side of the country in the middle of nowhere in a couple of days. Secret Service definitely would go down. And you'd hope the IRS would be back up. I hope the VA would be up at this point. But it's I think part of it, and I'm reading some of these comments, and a lot of it's about communication. That was part of the roundtable too, is how do you communicate successes in agencies in a way that's appropriate to be quote, advertising government and talking about successes in informing people. There's the comment that's up right now is astounded how little people know about government, how government works, and what to expect from it. And I think they're spot on. I think it's a great comment and couldn't be more true.
Yeah.
And I think explaining to people what government does, what it doesn't do, what they should expect, and frankly, what they shouldn't expect. I think that will help drive people's perception.
So for folks who aren't aware, the president's management agenda, which is every administration produces a program for improving the performance and efficiency of government. This administration picked up on the work of previous administrations to advance or improve the customer experience that Americans enjoy in what are called high impact agencies. The chart I'm displaying right now shows the degree to which customers of these agencies reported feeling that they trusted the agency. This is a dynamic chart that you can find on performance.gov. I considered taking you to the live dynamic chart on performance.gov, but Christian warned me about my technical deficiencies. And so pivoting to a live website, he thought would be a little bit of a bridge too far. So I encourage you to visit that, but if you'll hover, when you go there and hover over some of these sites, you'll see that that when you ask people about their engagement with agencies, they'll rate things, right on the spot. And so I think this big bubble is the Internal Revenue Service. But it highlights the fact that there's ongoing effort to be really intentional about ensuring agencies understand their obligation to provide a high level of service, a constantly improving level of service to the American people who have incredibly high expectations given improvements in customer service by industry.
I was going to say, Robert, I would encourage people to go and look at this. I think there's some fascinating data that can show up, and it's like I said, I think it's just fascinating when you go and look at it, and you can extrapolate ideas from it on what you can do. And I think most of the people, nearly all the people on this session that we have right now are state and local government people. And it's so we're talking a lot about federal. It's directly relates back to what you're doing in the business of government that you're in.
Yeah. So this slide, I think probably states the obvious, but factors contributing to trust, the things that people say led them to feel high trust. So won't surprise you that effectiveness and ease were high among them. Efficiency, might be a term that's not really clear to pinpoint what you're talking about. Effectiveness is, did you get what you came for? Ease is how easy was it for you to get what you wanted? Efficiency might be a little bit more nebulous. Transparency, you often just want to know where things are in the process. Where am I in the wait time? Fairness didn't really come up, but employee interaction is a critical factor. Having been hung up on by a customer service representative at a federal agency, I can tell you that did not give me a feeling of high trust in that organization. So, these are kind of obvious. I don't know if you have a reaction, Christian.
I do. Yeah, I had to go get a new driver's license, and I moved to Florida, and I went in and I was shocked how easy it was to get my driver's license, to re-register a car. I was in and out in less than 30 minutes from the time I walked in the door. Not terribly long ago, for the first time in my life, I lost my driver's license, and I had to go get a replacement. And I blocked off a couple hours on my calendar. I was in and out in less than 10 minutes. I walked in, told them what I did, put me in the right queue. I got through it and took care of it. So when I see things like that work and take place versus what I had come from, where it would take hours, where you go in and all the things you experience, and you see this, it's a Saturday Night Live skit about being, Bureau Motor Vehicles, and then you do it so fast. You give a lot of you give a lot of credit. You have a lot of confidence in their of the government's ability overall that to spend your tax dollars wisely on how it's doing. Whenever you get that efficiency and that effectiveness and ease of use, right? Those are the things that are going to drive it. And employee interaction. Just put all of this into your own. My suggestion is put this chart into use in your personal life whenever you're working with citizens, whenever they're calling and asking questions. How do you help them, right? And how do you help get them through? And look at, if you're running an organization that is a citizen facing, where there is a lot of interaction, like a BMV, how are you doing it? Are you doing it well? We had a session yesterday around risk assessments for coming into government. And one of the panelists said, even if you've been in government and you think things are going really well, that's the time to take a look. And it's not just a matter of risk, it's a matter of effectiveness. Are you doing the right things? Or are you slipping into, processes that are old, that, really should be looked at? And are you doing it as well as you can do it? Right? Government's not meant to be bleeding edge, but it can certainly be close to leading edge on doing things that will drive citizen satisfaction and better customer service.
So I'm just left guessing. Did you trace your steps? I mean, did you get carded at a bar somewhere and leave your?
Because I do get carded a lot. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I knew
Yeah.
it. I knew it. Okay. So, one of the points we want to leave you with is that all levels of governments are in this together. I noted in the chat, someone said that folks on the call are often recipients of federal assistance grants. And, there's confusion over which level of government provides what level of service, who's accountable for what. And distrust is obviously impacted by broader political issues. And the, to Christian's point, if anyone ever's gone to the DMV and you compare that to an Apple Store experience, the DMV is going to lose. Not that we can't achieve that level of quality. And I want to note here that the Academy enlisted pollster Frank Luntz to convene focus groups to tease out just what we need to do to better communicate with the American citizenry about government so that we can at least do our part to reverse this trend. And here are, so part of the work that Cherry Bekaert has commissioned with the National Academy of Public Administration includes a framework developed by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. It's an international organization. They've got a framework to help countries think about ways to improve trust in government because it's critical to strengthening democracy. And as they say, public trust leads to greater compliance with a wide range of public policies, such as health responses, regulations, and the tax system. Also nurtures political participation, strengthens social cohesion, and builds institutional legitimacy. In the longer term, trust is needed to help governments tackle long-term societal challenges, such as climate change, aging populations, and changing labor markets. Apologize for the European misspelling of labor. Frank Luntz, though, who led these focus groups on behalf of the Academy, noted we need governmental agencies to serve the American people in an open and honest way. And those institutions need the trust of the American people in order to do their jobs effectively. I don't know if you have a reaction, Christian.
I think that the comments are right on. I think back to two of the political people that I admire most are Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they are both people of very strong convictions and in their beliefs. They would get together. They had an agreement that 6 o'clock business stopped, and they would go after each other politically during the day, but at 6 o'clock they could pick up the phone and call one another, and they did most nights. And a couple nights a week they would get together at the White House and just talk over issues and share a cocktail. Those days are, unfortunately, we need to get back to that, and I see it a lot more in the local level or in the state level, where you get people of different parties that can sit down and talk and do the agenda. They may not agree, but they'll say, okay, we both want to get to the same place. And I think that gets to Frank Lutz's comment about government agencies serving the American people in an open and honest way. People have trust in government when there's transparency. And I've been reading through these comments, and I love the comments. And some of them are things that we all just have to deal with, right? There's people from outside your jurisdiction that come in and just throw bombs, right? You see it all the time. But it's the local people. And one of my Robert, you've heard me talk about that. My neighbor across the street and I are probably diametrically opposed on our political views, but in the evening we'll get together, and it's a nice evening. We'll sit in the porch and talk about current events, and we don't get mad at each other. We just talk, and we want to understand why each other thinks the way we do, right? I think it's so important to have that understanding of why things are. I mean, I'm not making decisions anymore, and he's retired from government, so he's not making them anymore either. But I think just in for my own personal growth, or my maybe it would talk me off the edge sometimes when I watch the news.
Keep your blood pressure down.
Yeah. It does. It's it's good to see that, and to know that you can still have those kind of discussions. But I think that's what drives trust, is when people understand it. And it's the governor I worked for used to say, just do the right things, let the chips fall where they may. And people liked him, and people voted for him. He had an incredible victory, the largest victory in the country for his reelect. And everybody didn't agree with him, but they knew he was doing it because he believed it was the right thing to do, whatever that thing might have been. Right. And I think we need to get back to that. And it's something that when we wrap up, I do want to talk about a little bit as we try to move the trust campaign into state and local government.
Yeah, and the clock is being our enemy here. Let's go to the second polling question, I think. So, in your opinion, what's the biggest problem, challenge, or disappointment government agencies need to address right now? Immigration, healthcare, spending, national security, none of the above. And you'll see why we limited it to those issues in a minute. Let's see if there are questions. I posted a link to the performance.gov data source. Someone asked, what does civil service mean compared to the others? I think those are just terms that were asked to sort of tease out what people thought about different words. So they're sort of the same way to describe the same thing.
The rating about correlate the nature of the service provided by the agency. Yeah, it would. There's some places you're going to go and you're not going to get good news, or
Yeah.
you're going in for things. So yeah, you're going to tend to rate them lower than going and getting a fishing license or a hunting license.
Yeah. Somebody also asked what's the date of the data on these charts? A lot of it's really recent. We've tried to include the most recent data published by these organizations. Oh, did I miss can we put back up the polling results? So immigration, healthcare, and spending generally correlate. So here's where focus group participants, the people who were participated in the Frank Luntz-led focus groups, answered. So I think this generally matches what you said. Immigration, healthcare, spending, sort of at the same. GOP rates immigration higher and spending higher. We didn't include abortion because that's a hot button issue, or gun laws. But this is just an interesting perspective on how the world sees issues and which ones they think deserve the most attention. So what does the data tell us about maintaining trust? What do these focus groups tell us? So levels of government closer to citizens are rated more highly. Local governments can be trusted more for various reasons. They're more nonpartisan. The issues they're tackling are not that controversial, generally. And there's lack of citizens' knowledge of what's happening as the farther away you go in the government. And the role appears to matter. So providing direct services or support, like people at the Postal Service or the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And there are people doing their job. So those institutions that don't look like they're addressing major challenges, like spending by Congress, for one, in contrast to those who are actually getting work done. So at agencies, but as well as at state and local government. The focus groups tell you not to go too far. The public doesn't react well if the government is trying to do too much or do something too dramatic. And they want more policies in the middle. It's much more difficult to get things done in a hyper partisan environment. Independents, no surprise, in particular, are put off by partisanship. And external factors matter. A good economy, rally events like 9/11, those things have an important impact on trust in government and should frankly be leveraged. Effects of the economy may be diminished as the ratings of the economy are tied more closely to who's in power. And then media, cable news, social media have morphed the way Americans get information about government or anything else. And so that will have an enormous impact.
I think this was a great slide. The avoid going too far, I think, is a great way to sum things up, because it's not about going to the extremes. It's staying in the what's smart to do? Does this
Yeah.
make sense? People respond to good decisions and good ideas.
So another outcome of the focus group: communicate better, disagree better. Christian talked about
Yep.
his evenings on the porch. Because we're divided, we don't engage with each other in as meaningful ways as we used to. Be curious before deciding to be furious. Attributes of good government that ought to be emphasized: trustworthy. People will trust you if they believe you have their interests at heart, just like Christian's story about his old boss. Be accountable, be transparent, say what you mean what you say, do what you say. And this is true at all levels. And be in real touch with real people. Again, the closer you are to the people, the higher the connection will be. But folks at every level want to see an efficient and effective government, and one that doesn't waste a lot of money. And don't be too political or partisan. Focus on results, not as much on re-election.
My favorite ones to communicate better, disagree better.
Yeah,
Just because we don't agree on something doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or you're a bad person.
that's right.
It just means that we don't agree on something.
So, third polling question. If you had to choose, which statement most accurately sums up your position in government? I get more in government services than I pay for in taxes. I pay more in taxes than I get in government services. And I get just about the same level of services that I pay for in taxes. So I'm gonna see if there are no new questions, since we but lots of comments.
Yeah. Comments are fantastic. They are
Yeah.
really, I'm really enjoying reading them.
Still wish I could sing a little ditty.
Yeah, me too. Huh.
So I guess that's not a surprise. More people think they pay more in taxes than they get in government services. And I don't know what the answer there is, but at a minimum, the government could do a better job explaining just what it does with the money it pays. So these are factors that sort of mirror what folks were asked. What attributes led to a good a trusting experience? So what does government administration look like at its best? Trustworthy, accountable, in touch with people. Interestingly, innovative and efficient aren't things that people look for a government administration to be at its best. Oh,
So
our
yeah,
last.
and this is really, as we're going to wrap things up. I mentioned at the beginning, we've been doing a trust in government. We call it a campaign that it's really largely been focused on federal government. We've been trying to get it started in more earnestly in the state and local market. So I'm going to ask you for your help and interest. If you have, we have a number of clients that want to participate with us and doing, it could be podcasts, 10 or 15 or 20-minute podcasts where it will be interviewed by Robert or me or somebody else on the team that's in that area, but talk about places where it gives a chance to talk about your government or what you're doing, that where you may have done something really creative, improved service in government, taken a bad situation and made it better. What are the stories that want to be out there, or just some things that are just conversations like we're having today? This is what we're seeing out there. How could you make it better? Some of the comments would be great, talking points for this. So if you click yes, please reach out to me. Even if you're not sure, go and connect on that, and then you and I can connect, or one of us will connect with you and talk about what some of the ideas are. and how we could plug you in. It could be for, like I said, a podcast or some type of white paper, a webinar that we do pretty regularly. We have lots of different venues, lots of different ways to do it. And hope you'll join us as we go through it. So with that, that concludes our first session for the day. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you found it useful. And like we said, any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Robert at any time. We really do value your feedback and hope that you'll take part in the short survey that will pop up whenever this closes. It's what we use to try to make this better. And then just as a reminder, on the registration site is linked for the next in the chat for the next session, which is at 11 a.m. Crafting an impeccable ACFR and tips for modernization. Say at 11, and then as with
Sorry, I'm going to miss that.
Sorry. As with all of them, the recordings will be available in about a week. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks for the great comments and questions that came in, and look forward to talking again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for being with you, Christian, and everybody.